In 1951, a farmer named Julián Santana Barrera pulled a small body from the murky water of a canal on his island. A girl, no more than 7 years old, had drowned. Julián hung that doll in a tree as an offering to the dead child's spirit. It was meant to comfort her, he told his family, to show respect. So he hung another, and another. He scavenged them from trash heaps, fished them from the canals, traded his crops for them in the markets. Dolls with missing limbs, shattered faces, eyes that stared. His family thought grief had broken his mind. But Julián insisted the girl visited him. Sometimes, he said, he saw her standing at the edge of the water at dawn. The island sits in Xochimilco, a maze of ancient canals carved by the Aztecs 7 centuries ago. These waterways once fed the floating gardens that sustained an empire. Julián's island was one of hundreds. Unremarkable, a few acres of soil and trees where he grew vegetables and lived alone. No electricity, no running water, just the canals, the crops, and eventually the dolls. Neighbors avoided the place. Boatmen refused to tie up there after dark. Children who passed it claimed the dolls turned their heads to watch. Julián never denied it. He told visitors the dolls were alive, possessed by the spirits of children who drowned in the canals over the decades. He said they protected the island, that they whispered warnings to him. What no one could explain was this: when investigators later searched for records of the drowned girl, the child who started it all, they found nothing. No missing persons report, no death certificate, no grieving family. Some say Julián invented her to justify his obsession. Others believe she drowned long before 1951, perhaps decades earlier, and her spirit had simply waited for someone who could see her. By the 1990s, word of the island had spread beyond Xochimilco. Journalists arrived, photographers, paranormal investigators with recording equipment who claimed to capture children's voices on tape. Voices saying, "Help me and don't leave," in spots where Julián stood alone. Julián told them all the same story. The girl, the first doll, the voices in the dark. He showed them the tree where he'd pulled her from the water, a gnarled ahuhuit whose roots twisted into the canal. Visitors began leaving dolls of their own, offerings to appease whatever haunted the place. They tied them to branches, propped them in the crooks of trees, hung them from fishing line. Each one, Julián accepted. The island became a pilgrimage site. Some came out of curiosity. Others sought contact with the dead. A few claimed healing, that touching the dolls cured illnesses or brought luck. Julián never charged admission, but the dolls aged. Plastic cracked under the sun, paint peeled, eyes faded, vines grew through their torsos, insects nested in their hollow heads. Over 1,000 dolls hang from every tree and structure on the island. Visitors report hearing whispers and childlike laughter in the trees. The island receives approximately 3,000 tourists every year. And still, Julián hung more. In his final years, neighbors said he barely slept. He spent his nights walking the island, adjusting the dolls, whispering to them. Some heard him arguing, full conversations with voices only he could hear. His nephew, Anastasio, visited in April 2001. He later told reporters that Julián seemed afraid. He kept glancing at the canal, at the ahuhuit tree. "She's calling me," he said. On April 17th, 2001, Anastasio returned to the island to bring his uncle supplies. He found Julián face down in the canal, floating beneath the ahuhuit tree, the same tree where he'd found the girl 50 years earlier. He was 86 years old. The official cause of death, drowning. No signs of struggle, no witnesses. The police closed the case quickly. But those who knew Julián asked questions. He'd swum those canals his entire life. The dolls offered no answers. They hung silent in the trees, watching as the boats carried Julián's body away. But in the weeks that followed, visitors reported something new. The island felt different, heavier. Others heard 2 voices now instead of 1, a girl singing, and a man answering. Anastasio inherited the island. He kept it exactly as Julián left it. Every doll in place, every tree undisturbed. The tourists came in greater numbers than ever. Thousands each year, drawn by the story of the drowned girl and the man who spent his life appeasing her. because the island's reputation had grown darker. It was no longer just the story of a grieving man and a dead child. Now people spoke of curses, of visitors who fell ill after touching the dolls, asking the occupants to row themselves away in silence. The tales multiplied, and with each new story, fewer people were willing to visit after dark. But Julián never stopped hanging dolls. By the late 1980s, his collection had swollen to over 800 dolls. They covered every tree, dangled from every wire. Some he wrapped in cloth to protect them from rain. Visitors who came in daylight described a strange sensation, the feeling of being followed by invisible eyes. Many reported sudden drops in temperature as they walked beneath certain trees. Julián himself gave conflicting accounts of what he heard and saw. To some visitors, he said the dolls were guardians, protecting the island from evil spirits. To others, he admitted they terrified him. His nephew, Anastasio, visited in 1992 and found Julián muttering to the dolls. He had given them names. He fed them. Anastasio tried to convince his uncle to leave, but Julián refused. He said the girl wouldn't let him go, that if he left the island, she would follow him home. Then, in April 2001, Julián's behavior changed. He began telling visitors that the girl had appeared to him in a dream. She wasn't angry anymore, he said. She had forgiven him, but she wanted one final doll. He spent 3 weeks searching the canals for it. Visitors brought him dozens of dolls, but none were right. Then, on April 17th, a Trajanera operator named Rosa found a white bride doll floating near the island. The canal system stretches 170 kilometers through southern Mexico City. These waterways are remnants of ancient Aztec chinampas from 1345 AD. UNESCO designated Xochimilco a World Heritage Site in 1987. He hung it from the largest tree at the island's center, facing the canal where the girl had drowned 50 years earlier. He stood beneath it for hours, staring. Neighbors reported he didn't sleep that night. The next morning, April 18th, 2001, Julián's body was found floating in the canal, in the exact spot where, he claimed, he had found the drowned girl in 1951. He was 86 years old. Anastasio was the one who found him. He said his uncle was a strong swimmer, that he had never shown any sign of wanting to die. Some said it was suicide, others said it was an accident, but the locals had a different theory. They said the girl had finally called him home. After Julián's death, his family considered dismantling the island, taking down the dolls, burning them. But when they arrived to begin the work, they found something that stopped them cold. They left everything untouched, and within months, the island became something new. No longer a hermit's refuge, but a destination. But the strange occurrences didn't stop. In 2004, a group of American tourists reported that their photographs showed a child's face in the window of Julián's cabin, even though the cabin was locked and empty. A year later, a Mexican television crew filming a documentary spent the night on the island. At 3:17 a.m., all 4 of their cameras shut down simultaneously. Paranormal investigators descended on the island. They brought EMF meters, thermal cameras, voice recorders. Nearly all reported anomalies. Sudden temperature drops of 15 degrees. EVP recordings with children's voices. But skeptics offered simpler explanations. The island sits in a humid, mosquito-ridden canal zone where malarial fevers were once common. The illnesses tourists reported could be explained by contaminated water, insect bites, heat exhaustion, the malfunctioning equipment, and the original drowning. The girl Julián claimed to have seen in 1951? No record of it exists. No missing child report, no newspaper story, no death certificate. Researchers searched archives for weeks. They found nothing. Some psychologists suggested Julián had suffered a psychotic break, that the girl was a hallucination born from isolation and guilt over some forgotten trauma, that the dolls were a coping mechanism that spiraled into obsession. But that theory collapsed under one undeniable fact. Julián wasn't the only one who saw her. In 1996, a canal worker named Eduardo reported pulling a child's body from the water near the island. And in 2003, a tourist named Sarah Chen photographed what she thought was a child standing among the dolls. When she reviewed the image later, she realized the figure was translucent. By 2010, the island held over 1,500 dolls. Visitors continued to bring new ones, hanging them in silent tribute to Julián's obsession. or to appease whatever presence they believed lingered there. First reported illness was in 1987 when a visitor collapsed on the island. Between 2001 and 2004, 17 boats reported engine failure near the shore. In 2008, a film crew's equipment failed simultaneously across all 4 cameras. But the transformation was not complete. In the years following Julián's death, something changed on the island. In 2008, a Mexican paranormal team spent 3 nights on the island with recording equipment. At 2:47 a.m. on the second night, all 4 investigators heard what they described as children giggling in the trees. The team's lead investigator, Carlos Mendoza, later stated he would never return. He claimed one doll, a blonde-haired figure with cracked porcelain, followed him with its eyes throughout the night. By 2010, the island had become Mexico's most infamous haunted location, but the stories grew darker. The woman's account matched others. At least 7 visitors between 2009 and 2013 claimed to see a man in a straw hat near the water's edge, always in peripheral vision, always vanishing when looked at directly. Then came the deaths. In 2011, a local fisherman named Esteban Cruz drowned in the canal just 200 meters from the island. 2 years later, in 2013, a teenage boy visiting with friends reportedly dared himself to swim out to the island after dark. He made it halfway before his companions heard him scream. The Mexican government, facing mounting pressure, commissioned a formal study in 2014. A team of psychologists and folklorists interviewed 112 people who had visited the island. 81 reported feeling an overwhelming sense of being watched. The study concluded that the island induced acute psychological distress in a significant percentage of visitors, but stopped short of attributing it to paranormal causes. The lead psychologist, Dr. But Dr. Torres herself admitted one detail troubled her. During her own visit to conduct the study, she placed a small red doll on a specific branch and photographed it. By 2015, the island had attracted international attention. Travel blogs called it one of the world's most haunted places. YouTube channels dedicated to the paranormal descended with cameras and microphones. Skeptics dismissed it as a hoax, a trick of lighting or wind. The uploader, a Canadian filmmaker named Marcus Holt, stood by his footage. The theories multiplied. Some believed the island was cursed by the spirit of the drowned girl, still seeking justice or companionship. Others insisted it was Julián himself, bound to the place by his obsession, unable to rest. In 2016, a local priest, Father Miguel Ortega, was invited to perform a blessing on the island. He arrived with holy water and prayers, determined to cleanse the site. He lasted 20 minutes. Father Ortega's refusal to return only deepened the island's reputation. Tourists who had once come out of curiosity now came seeking proof of the supernatural. He spent his last decade speaking to the dolls by name each morning. Neighbors reported hearing children's laughter from the island at night. His nephew found 43 dolls arranged in a circle the week before he died. Her daughter did wake. 3 days later, she emerged from a coma doctors had deemed irreversible. Yet not all who sought the island's favor found mercy. In 2017, a man named Roberto Vega visited alone, carrying a doll he claimed belonged to his deceased wife. When Roberto awoke in the hospital, he spoke only once about the island. He said he had heard his wife's voice calling his name from the water. He had followed it. And then, nothing. By 2018, the Mexican Tourism Board faced a dilemma. The island generated significant revenue. Thousands visited each year, but the incidents were mounting. In response, authorities installed warning signs and required all visitors to be accompanied by a licensed guide. They limited access to daylight hours only. They forbade overnight stays. Yet the restrictions did little to deter the truly determined. The police fined them and escorted them off. But the images they posted, dolls with fresh scratches on their plastic faces, shadows in the background that seemed to shift between frames, went viral. And yet, for all the fear, for all the warnings, people kept coming. Some sought thrills, some sought proof, some sought communion with the dead. Because the island, it seemed, was not finished. The dolls continued to multiply. Visitors still brought them, compelled by something they could not name. Ho had drowned half a century before. But the story doesn't end with whispers. Because what began as one man's obsession has become something far larger, far stranger. the island has transformed into a pilgrimage site. Every year, thousands of people navigate the murky canals to visit Julián's Island. They come from all over the world, drawn by the legend, the horror, the mystery, and almost every single one of them brings a doll. It's become a ritual. You don't just observe the island, you contribute to it. You add your doll to the collection, hang it from a branch, and walk away. The island now holds over 1,500 dolls. They cover every tree, every fence post, every surface. Barbie dolls, porcelain babies, action figures, vintage toys from the 1950s, all of them rotting together in the humid air. Julián's nephew, Anastasio, now maintains the island. He lives in the same shack where his uncle died, and he insists that the phenomena haven't stopped. If anything, they've intensified. Paranormal investigators have descended on the island repeatedly. In 2015, a team from the University of Mexico spent 3 nights there with recording equipment. Motion sensor cameras have been installed throughout the island. Multiple times, they've triggered in the middle of the night with no visible cause. The footage shows dolls swaying when there's no wind, heads turning slightly between frames. Thermal imaging reveals cold spots forming around specific dolls, localized temperature drops of up to 15 degrees with no environmental explanation. Always the same dolls. Always the ones Julián hung first in the early years. By 2012, over 2,000 dolls covered every surface of the island. Some dolls arrived with notes begging for protection or forgiveness. Julián never allowed anyone to remove a single doll from the island. Visitors report overwhelming sensations of being watched. Photographers claim their cameras malfunction near certain dolls. Multiple people have fainted on the island with no medical explanation. But the most disturbing accounts come from those who've tried to remove dolls from the island. 3 separate individuals attempted to take dolls as souvenirs in the early 2000s. All 3 reported violent nightmares within days. The question remains, was Julián truly haunted by the spirit of a drowned girl? Or did he, through the sheer force of obsession and madness, create something else entirely? Some researchers believe in residual haunting, the idea that extreme emotional trauma can imprint itself on a location. Julián's fear, his guilt, his loneliness replayed for half a century, and the dolls absorbed it, became vessels for it. Others point to the ancient history of Xochimilco itself. The floating gardens were sacred to the Aztecs. Sacrifices were made in these canals. The entire region is built on the bones of a civilization that practiced ritual death. And then there's the simplest explanation, collective belief. When thousands of people visit a place expecting it to be haunted, believing it to be cursed, they create a kind of psychological feedback loop. Fear becomes contagious. But that doesn't explain the EVP recordings. It doesn't explain the thermal anomalies. The Mexican government has considered shutting down public access to the island multiple times, but the tourism revenue for Xochimilco is too significant. The island has become one of Mexico's most famous paranormal sites, featured in documentaries worldwide. Local spiritual healers, curanderos, refuse to set foot on the island. They say the energy there is twisted, that it pulls at you. Children, particularly young girls, report the most intense experiences on the island. Many refuse to disembark from the boats. Those who do often start crying within minutes, claiming they hear someone calling their name. And yet, the pilgrimage continues. The dolls keep coming. Every tree branch sags under new weight. Every rainstorm knocks a few down, and by the next week, they're replaced. The island grows denser, more tangled, more suffocating. Anastasio, the caretaker, says he's tried to leave multiple times. But every time he packs his belongings, something stops him. A doll falls, a voice calls, a dream so vivid he wakes in a cold sweat. Because the island, perhaps, doesn't let you go. Not if you've lived there. Not if you've hung a doll. Not if you've whispered to the wind and asked for protection. The pact, once made, is binding. Today, the island of the dolls remains one of the most haunted places on Earth. Not because of what happened there, but because of what continues to happen. The dolls still watch. The water still whispers. And if you ever find yourself in a boat drifting through the canals of Xochimilco at dusk, and you see the island rising from the mist, covered in 1,000 rotting dolls, ask yourself this: are you visiting them?